Let's take a look at times from an administrative point of view. So the first thing is on the top left-hand corner, whenever a story is running, we have this story runs up here, and this changes the view to give us a new way to view how the event data is happening from action to action. So here I can see each and every story run that might be happening. And then as I select an action, it's going to give me more context about that event data. Again, this is just a different way to look at the event data versus going into the story and then reviewing it on an action by action basis. We can also see on the bottom left-hand corner here how many events there were over how many actions, when it started, and then when it stopped. So you can see that total duration of that story run. We can also see the story run GUID. This is a unique identifier per story run. Let's jump back into our story. The next thing we'll take a look at is a way to lock down a story. So right now I can move things around, but if I want to make sure that no one can change anything going on in the story, in the top right hand corner, I can simply lock the story. Locking the story means that I can't move any of the actions and I can't change any of the configurations. Now, if we want to add an extra layer on top of our story to make sure that people will have to request a change before it is pushed live, we can turn on change control in the top right hand corner. From here, a story will be broken into live or test. So under test is where we can actually make our changes. So if I disconnected this trigger from here to here, it's not actually going to reflect on the live immediately. Now, if I go back to test, I can go to view changes. And this is where I can say disconnected trigger. Didn't need this trigger anymore. Request review. Now, since I'm an admin, I can just approve this. And then when I'm ready, I can push the changes and that will move it from live to, and that will move it from test to live. Any changes that are made as building will be logged in the version control. So if I click right here and go into versions, I will see changes that are actively being saved every couple of minutes, but then I can also see when change control is turned on, it will push those updates right here. And if you ever need to go to a previous version, you can just click the little magnifying glass. It'll show you what changes have been made, and then I can also see it right here. If you want, you can also hit the plus in the top right to add a new version. All right, let's jump out of the story and go into the dashboard. So in the top left-hand corner, I'm going to hit the dashboard button right here. And then from here, I'm going to see all of the stories that are currently on the team. Teams are a way that we structure and can organize the different members that are within our organization. So up here, there is a demo team, there's testing. Under all teams, I'll see that there's a couple different ones in here. There's first team and advanced cert and so forth. And each team has their own stories. You can also have your own cases dedicated to a team, dashboards, records, credentials, resources, and then under manage, I can choose who is on the team. And from here is where I can invite people. So I could just do invite and then add in whatever their email address is. Hit send. And then I can also choose if the person is an admin, an editor, or a viewer. By default, they're a viewer. You can also remove someone from a team. Over here, you can also rename the team, and then you can also set notifications. So the notifications are if you have cases or change control, and you need to add in a webhook for that. And these are just those notifications as change control is happening or cases are happening. You can just send them to a webhook which can then kick off a story. You can also access your notifications in the top right-hand corner and then click the three dots and then go to settings. This is where you can choose when you're going to be notified, if you want to get notified on all stories or subscribed stories or none, for a bunch of different various options here. A story that's subscribed, by the way, is in the top. Here's where you subscribe and unsubscribe. Next, you'll see that there is archived stories. These are any stories that have been marked for deletion, and you can either permanently delete them or restore them from this page. So if someone said, hey, I deleted my story, I don't know where it is, you can check the archive and then unarchive it from there. Next, we'll pop into credentials. Creating credentials, pretty straightforward. You're just going to go to new in the top right-hand corner and then select what type of credential you want to make. So if you want to do one of these kind of easy setup ones, here I'll grab Notion. And it'll go and prompt me through OAuth. So just going through the prompts and boom, now I have this credential set up for Notion. So anytime I'm making HTTP requests to Notion, I can just reference credential.notion, which is really awesome. You can also go to new, and then you can do them based off of it being a JOT token, OAuth 2.0, text, or anything else. And when you're setting these up, you can go and choose whatever you want for the description. When you put in the value, you can see it initially by hitting this I, but after you save it, you can't actually see the value again for security purposes. You can always update a credential later on with new API keys or passwords or whatever it is. But after you enter in this information once, just keep in mind that you're not going to be able to see this again because it's going to be encrypted. Down here, I want to restrict direct access, and I want this to only be accessible when I'm making requests, let's say, to example.com. So you can lock down your credentials based on where you're making that request to. You're also able to add in metadata for your credentials, and you can choose who's going to have access to this credential. So if you want it to be available to just a few teams or everyone. Now you'll see when I click into the test API credential that I set up, I can't actually see what the value is anymore. But I can always add in new information and then hit save. What's nice is we can also see what actions are associated to a given credential. So up here, we're in the details. We can also see what actions they're associated to, which is super helpful. And then you can even do test credentials. So you can make it so that this credential can be tested, and then you can even enter in information down below. From this page, you can always create folders. So if you want to have folders for different things, miscellaneous API keys. And then I'm going to go back to my credentials. And then if I want to drag things into here, just drag and drop, pretty easy. And then you can always edit your folder or delete it. You can also see what credentials are shared with a dedicated team stemming from somewhere else. So I see that there is this new API key 2, and it originated from this Yanni team, even though I've been on this demo team. So when you're sharing credentials amongst different teams, it'll actually show up as a shared item. Resources are kind of similar to credentials in the sense that you can create something that gets referenced in a story. This is kind of helpful if you have a email address that you want to get referenced throughout your story a couple different times. Next, I'm just going to pull into my records. So I have 2 records that are currently set up. I'm just going to go to this records alert, and it doesn't look like there's a lot in here. Let me see if I can go last 365 days. So I'll see on here that there isn't a chart, but there is a table here with a bunch of different information. So if I want to filter, if I want to see only high severity items, I can go into the filter in the top, and I can choose filter severity equals high. Now I can see all of the high severity items. I can see the description, the affected user, and so forth. And then from here, I can actually export the table. I can also manage my records here. If I need to add or remove additional fields, I can hide my charts, show my charts, and so forth with the table. If I want to add a chart, I'm just going to click right here, severity. Let's say I want to do a pie chart on severity. Why not? So everything is high. Well, that's also because I have the filter on. So if I remove my filter, I'll see it's mostly high and medium. And you can kind of get very fancy with this. From the records page, you can also select records to add to a case. So if you're using the platform for case management, you can always attach those records to a dedicated case. Here, I see all of my current cases that I can access. Dashboards shows us any dashboards that we might have access to. Now in the top right-hand corner, if I click on this little icon, I can go to profile and I can actually choose different avatars, which is pretty cool. And again, I just selected that from the top right-hand corner, clicked profile, and then clicked the little icon here. You can also alternatively do a picture if you just want to upload a picture for your profile. This will also show you how many teams you have, team admin or editor, viewer, case manager, any custom roles that you might have set up. In the top, you can also switch between light mode and dark mode, which is pretty cool. And there's also the what's new in Tines if you want to see new features that might have been released recently. Here, there's a support regex and custom response for webhook actions with rules. Cool. This didn't exist before, now it exists now. Sorry. These are our team settings. Over here, we have our different teams. You can also create a team from here. And then down here, these are all of the settings for the tenant. So you can have tags set up for your stories. So if you want to have stories associated to, let's say like Slack or CrowdStrike or whatever you want to have it associated to, every time you have a story with that specific vendor, you can always add it as a tag. Here's where you can manage those tags if you want to edit or delete a tag or add a new one. We have templates. As you have people creating actions and then you want to save it for your tenant, you can save actions as a template and then it gets sent here. And what that looks like, I'll show you real quick, is let's say I wanted to use this action again. I'm going to click the three dots and then I can create template. I'm just going to go ahead and hit save with the current configurations. I'll call this AI action example. Hit save. Now if I go to templates, private templates, and then I have this template example and this generate summary. So you can have it accessible throughout your story, which is really cool. To modify those, you would just be in the dashboard and under the top, you would go to templates, and this is where you would see all those templates. So from here, you can either delete them, click into them, and make any adjustments. And these templates are only, the ones that you create are only accessible for your tenant. Next, we have the reporting. Here we can see how many stories you currently have published, how many events have been executed today. We can also see how much we have for time saved, depending on the task. So whenever your stories are done, you can always turn on time saved. That is, time saved can be turned on whenever you're not clicked on any action. And then under time saved, you can just turn it to however much time you think that you're saving every time the story runs. And it's just kind of like a cool way to monitor how your stories are saving you time with processes that you might have been doing manually before. Next, we have users. So I can see all of the users and what teams they're associated to. I typically feel like adding users from the team level is a little bit easier because if you add somebody from here, you still have to add them to any associated teams. So I like to start at the teams, but from here, you can always select a user, and under teams, you can say what teams you want to add this person to. Now you'll see that they're added down here. And then back into the teams, you can change their view. So if they're supposed to be editor or admin or viewer or case manager, if I click on roles, I can also see the current roles, and I can even create a new role. So when you're creating roles, you can select what kind. Here, I'll do an editor preset just so you can kind of see. Or I'll call this editor 2.0. So I don't want this editor to be able to update credentials. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to uncheck that. So they can't edit credentials. They can't manage events. I don't want them to be able to create folders. They can create and manage pages. Yes, they can read. I want them to be able to update and manage resources. I'm okay with that. Stories, create, run, and update. I don't want them to be able to manage. And then as I go on, I can kind of really create a catered experience and then hit create. And then now I have this editor 2.0. Under invitation settings, I can make it so only tenant owners can invite users to the tenant. So tenant owners, when I turn that on, you'll see that tenant owner is listed to the right of my name. If you click into a user, it'll tell you if they're a tenant owner or not. This is also where you can deactivate a user, by the way. From here, you can also expire a user session. So if someone shouldn't be in the system anymore, you can come in here, deactivate them, and then expire that user session. You can even go into the user activity to get a little bit more information. Now that pulls you into the audit log, which can be accessible from the top under admin and audit logs. From here, you can download as CSV. You can also choose a specific user, or you can choose a specific type of operation. So action name change. And then if I go to inputs, I can actually see what it was changed to. Let's go through some of these settings really quick. We have the AI settings, which lets you choose if the AI features are turned on or off. And it also lets you choose how you want to allocate those AI credits to which teams. Next, we have API keys. If you want to create an API key in Tines, we'll go to new, and then whatever type of API key you want to set up. Next, create an API key and then do save. And then here I have my secret token. So from here, I can copy it and then put it into a credential to then reference in my story. So it would be create API key, and then take that and then put it into a credential. Next, we have the authentication. This lets you choose between either Tines, SAML, or OpenIDC. So by default, it's set to Tines. So when somebody goes into enter, they just put in their email address, and then it sends a magic link to the email for someone to just click and then get access. You can also change your idle session timeout and your session timeout duration, totally up to y'all. And you can also expire all sessions. So that's everybody who's currently on the tenant. If you want more information, you can always click up here in the documentation. Next, we have the change control. This is where you can make it so that change control is enabled by default, and that also you can set it to require approval for all changes. Keep in mind that change control is pushing those changes to admins, and then admins have to approve and then push those. Next, we have credential access. This makes it so that credentials can only be used in cryptology functions or outbound requests when domains are restricted. Next, we have custom certificate authorities. Only really come here for specific reasons. Maybe as you're onboarding and you're on an on-prem service and you need a private CA, you might come in here and then set that up. Next, we'll take a look at login notice. This is where you can actually create a custom login notice for when users jump in. So if you want to make sure like, hey, always make sure to do XYZ as you're building your stories, or make sure to let your team know when you've published a story, whatever information that you want to share with the users that are within your tenant. Here we also have roles. So earlier I was showing how you can just click the role button in the admin settings under users, but you can also set up new roles here. I can also delete roles as well or edit them. And those are for the custom roles. See from here, you can't actually change these defaults. You can just create a new role based on the default. Next, we have the sender email addresses. Here is where I can create a email address that the send email action would come from. So by default, the send email action is going to be sending from mail@tines.com, I believe. And here's where you can choose what the email address would be, and then also setting up the domain that it's coming from, and then you would save email address. And lastly, we have story allocation. This is where you can choose what teams have access to how many stories they can build. So if you have 20 stories that you can build amongst 3 different teams, maybe one of the teams needs 10 of them for whatever reason, and then the other 2 teams have the split up 5, so it's 10, 5, and 5. If you don't turn this on, then basically like everyone will have access to whatever your maximum stories are, but this is kind of a way that you can manage and monitor it. And you'll see when I select these, it dynamically is going to show me how many ones are currently set up. So it's just basing it off of how many are used, and then I can choose what that limit would be. If we click on search in the top right-hand corner, it lets us search for any given story or action. So if I'm doing, let's say I'm going to look for the word summary. So there's a story here. It has a story that references, but it also has all these actions. I can see if there's any events in here and some other information. I can see that here are some AI actions as well. If I click onto any of these given actions, it'll pull me into that action for that story. That's all we have for today. Hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you next time.